Drug overdose deaths in this country have more than doubled over the past decade. Take a look at this map about what it looked like in 1999. And here's how it looked in 2015.
You're talking about 150 or so people dying a day. And a lot of these people, more than half of that 150, are very young people. You know, we're talking 17, 18, 19, 20, early 20s. And you know, in my own life, you know, just I know several people that have died of overdoses, people who've had overdoses and survived them, and that's just me. I'm sure most of the people watching this, whether they know it or not, know some people who have either died from this or who have a loved one who died from this.
Lawmakers face tough questions over an explosive 60 Minutes report. It found Congress helped disarm the Drug Enforcement Administration during the height of the opioid crisis.
Do you want to reverse the law that Congressman Marino helped pass that the DEA whistleblowers say has contributed to the expansion of the opioid crisis?
We're going to look at that very closely.
One of the bill's authors, Tennessee Republican Marsha Blackburn, said via a spokesperson today, if there are any unintended consequences from this bipartisan legislation, they should be addressed immediately. But Utah Republican Orrin Hatch defended the law and the $177,000 in donations he got from the drug industry while he was pushing it through.
We have some breaking news right now. President Donald Trump has just tweeted, Representative Tom Marino has informed me that he is withdrawing his name from consideration as drug czar.
Nancy Jones, thanks for your question. Or actually, it's a comment. She's pointing out the correlation between the lobbying dollars and the policy. So can you kind of connect these two things in terms of there's powerful lobbyists that are selling something that's killing people, making a lot of money, and then they're turning that money into influence in this building here.
The amount of money that is sloshing around in it is you know, hard to overstate. You know, it started in the 1990s. A company called Purdue Pharma that made OxyContin decided that this was going to be their multi-billion-dollar drug, and they were right. And what they did is they created something called something like the American Pain Society or something like that, and they put together this vast lobbying and PR apparatus to say that pain is a vital sign that the medical community is ignoring. And they were coming from a place that had some semblance of truth to it. In our kind of Calvinist approach to everything here in the United States, we oftentimes were telling people to suck it up a little bit too much and just deal with the pain. You know, healthcare policy in the U.S. is a notorious disaster, which leads to poor bedside manner. And so, the public was kind of ready to hear something like this: that there's too much pain, and there have been medical advances with non-addictive technologies that are going to allow us to reduce pain and suffering. That's something that's appealing to people. What was appealing to the doctors was all the money that was flowing, all the trips, all the conferences, all the samples, etc. And you combine that with this massive kind of lobbying blitz, and you start to see doctors saying, you know what, here, take a prescription for this, take a prescription for this. When you used to, people who'd get some dental surgery in the past might be told by their doctor to go take a Tylenol. Now they'd get a prescription for 30 Percocet or 30 Vicodin. You guys have probably experienced this, where you don't even ask for it, and it's just handed to you. And 99.99% of people in that situation, nothing bad ever happens to them. They don't get hooked. You have people who usually have some type of co-occurring disorders or some type of mental health issues, usually, not always, usually, and they do become habituated to it, and it becomes and then it becomes a problem, and then eventually they drift over to heroin if the pill supply isn't doing it for them anymore.
Last Day, who I happen to know as Jeremiah, is wondering about state and local politicians suing the opioid producers, I guess the drug companies. Do they have the kind of bank to succeed there?
Well, first of all, Purdue ended up paying, I think, a $700 million fine, one of the largest in American history, and pled guilty to some felonies. They're still going, though. And they're still, and so two things. One, yes, I know of at least one suit in California There are a lot of other suits that are going on because you're going to find lots of documents that show that they were making false claims about these medicines, that they knew they were harmful, and that they didn't take action because the money was just pouring in. And that is a parallel with tobacco. We're seeing the same pattern play out. That for a long time, the industry denied that there was anything going on, and then they start to fess up, and then the states sue, and then they're going to make some payouts. And the second part of the pattern that we're seeing is that after they got not necessarily shut down with tobacco in the United States, but the heat came on and the profits shrunk, so they exported lung cancer. So they went to Southeast Asia and India and Africa and everywhere around the globe, and kind of did the same playbook. And now so as smoking declined in the United States, it started rising around most places around the rest of the globe. Now Big Pharma is going around the globe and creating a worldwide opioid epidemic. You're going to start seeing massive cases of overdoses and addiction in Africa, in India, in Iran, in Southeast Asia, and in Central America, South America, everywhere that there can be a dollar squeezed.
Jonathan Ensley is asking, or actually saying, that it goes back to Afghanistan and the poppy fields.
Yeah, I actually said that once on PBS NewsHour 2-3 years ago or so. On the supply side, as a result of the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan, you've seen a surge in poppy production, and that heroin is going to go somewhere. It's going to find a market. There's no question about it. The DEA called PBS furious that I had said this, that I had even suggested that the invasion of Afghanistan and the surge in poppy production there had contributed to the U.S. opioid epidemic, and I sent them some DEA documents showing that opium and opioids and heroin were traveling from Afghanistan, to the United States. These DEA documents. So the DEA quieted down in their rage there. But they are extremely sensitive to that charge. But let's pretend for a second that the DEA itself didn't have documents showing that heroin was coming from Afghanistan directly to the United States. Let's say that wasn't the case. A lot of the heroin coming out of Afghanistan is heading to Iran and to Russia and also to Europe. Okay, a lot of the heroin that comes into the United States is from poppies grown in Mexico and then exported up. But we're talking about a worldwide market here. So even if not one single poppy produced anything that was ever bound for the United States, by the fact that it's supplying and oversupplying the markets in Russia, India, Iran, and Europe, and Africa for that matter, means that all of the Mexican production now goes to the United States. So he's right. There is certainly a connection between the invasion and the epidemic.
So Rivers had a kind of poignant question. She said, what about people who have chronic pain? What do we do?
It depends on where you are. And so my mother's somebody who has chronic pain, and so I've watched her deal with this issue for decades now. And I've watched as the politics have swung both directions. Now that it's in a more kind of restrictive moment, it's difficult for her to find doctors because she lives in a rural area. If you live in a city, you're probably much better off. But if you live in a rural area, it's very difficult to find a provider for a couple reasons. The DEA kind of when they try to figure out if something is what's known as a pill mill. That's a place where you just walk in with cash and basically walk out with pills. One of the things that they look for is how far are people driving to get there. The Oxy Highway for a long time was the interstate highway that runs from like Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, the Appalachia area down to South Florida. A lot of people were driving all the way down there, still are, I'm sure, driving all the way down there, with 4 people, filling up several hundred pills and then driving back to Appalachia. You'd see like the entire parking lot there would be filled with West Virginia or Tennessee plates. And so if there's nobody too close to you, and because it's a rural area, there probably isn't, who's willing to prescribe and dispense narcotics, then you have to go further. And now, the further that you go, then the more of a flag you are for regulators. And so, a place that's now you're trying to go somewhere that's 50 miles away, they may be sure that you are a legitimate pain patient who needs medication, but they see that you're coming from 50 miles away, and they just don't want that hassle kind of on their books when the feds come snooping around to see if they're a pill mill or not. It's a very difficult question. I mean, one answer, and this absolutely does not satisfy everyone, my mother included. One answer is medical marijuana. Many more people could be using medical marijuana than are, and could reduce the dependence on pain medication. There are certainly some people who are getting more than they need. There are other people who need more than they're getting, and those are the ones that are kind of getting caught in on the other side of the opioid epidemic.
Wesley wants to know how you know so much about the subject.
So I wrote a book, Wesley, in 2009 on kind of the history of, it's kind of a social history of drug use. It was called "This Is Your Country on Drugs." And I've always had as like a sub-beat of my reporting the drug war and the opioid epidemic. You could see that coming maybe 10 years ago or so, and so I've been writing about it and editing stories about it. In 2015, at the Huffington Post, we published a 20,000-word investigation into drug treatment centers. It's just always been a beat that I've covered.
So Nancy, who's all over the DEA, is responding to the people who are talking about chronic pain and how to deal with it. She says that marijuana is a much better way to address it, but basically this drug cartel that is infecting our government doesn't want people to know about that and would rather basically point people in the direction of these horribly addictive pills.
Yeah, that's right. And medical marijuana is not going to work better for everyone, for every particular thing, but for a huge number of people, it would be a relief, because narcotics do have serious, much more serious side effects, even aside from the addiction and risk of overdose.